in the heart of a lush African village, surrounded by swaying palm trees and the distant melody of drums, lived a young woman named Amina. Known for her warm smile and generous heart, she was loved by the villagers for her kindness and humility. Amina was often seen weaving colourful fabrics, tending to her small garden, or helping the elderly with their chores, tasks she embraced despite the heavy burden life had placed on her shoulders. Amina's life took a dark turn when her mother passed away, leaving her in the care of her stepmother Zainab. While the village's warmth embraced Amina, her home was cold and unwelcoming. Zainab, a sharp-tongued woman with piercing eyes, treated Amina not as a daughter, but as an unwanted responsibility. She saw Amina's presence as a reminder of her late husband's love for another woman, a love that Zainab never felt she could match. Despite her stepmother's hostility, Amina remained resilient. She dreamed of a life beyond the village, where she could find freedom, happiness, and perhaps even love. Every evening, she would sit under the ancient baobab tree and whisper her hopes to the stars, her heart yearning for a better future. Unbeknownst to Amina, Zainab harbored a secret plan. With her cunning mind constantly scheming, Zainab had decided that Amina would be her ticket to wealth and status. She began crafting a plot to marry Amina off, not to a man of kindness or integrity, but to someone who could fulfill her own selfish desires. Zainab kept her plans hidden, disguising her manipulations with feigned concern for Amina's welfare. She spoke to influential figures in the village, laying the groundwork for an arrangement that would serve her ambitions. To the outside world, Zainab appeared to be securing Amina's future, but those who truly knew her suspected otherwise. As Amina's 18th birthday approached, whispers began to spread throughout the village. Who would Zainab choose for Amina's hand in marriage? And why was she so secretive about the details? The tension grew, with even Amina sensing that her life was about to change in ways she could not yet comprehend. Little did she know, Zainab's plan would not only challenge Amina's resilience but also set in motion a series of events that would turn her world upside down, revealing secrets, testing loyalties, and leading to an unimaginable twist that no one in the village could have foreseen. The village buzzed with curiosity when a caravan of gleaming horses and silk-laden carriages rolled into the marketplace. The air, heavy with the scent of roasted yams and spices, seemed to crackle with anticipation. At its centre stood Bashier, a tall, broad-shouldered man, adorned in extravagant robes embroidered with gold. His every step radiated wealth, but his eyes betrayed a cold arrogance. The villagers, who valued humility and kindness above riches, exchanged wary glances. Bashier was no stranger to them. Though he hailed from a wealthy family in the neighbouring town, his reputation as a cruel and selfish man preceded him. As Bashier strode into the village chief's courtyard, Zainab's eyes lit up. To her, Bashier was a vision of opportunity. His wealth, power, and influence were exactly what she needed to elevate her own status. She decided in that moment that Bashier would marry Amina, sealing a deal that would rid her of what she considered a burden while securing her a lifetime of favours. That evening, Zainab approached Bashier, her tone sugary but her motives sharp. "You are a man of great stature," she purred, "and my daughter Amina is the most beautiful and virtuous girl in this village. Together you would make a perfect match." Bashier raised an eyebrow, intrigued, but not entirely convinced. "A virtuous girl, you say? And what does she bring to the table beyond beauty?" Zainab chuckled, undeterred. "Amina is obedient, humble, and knows her place. She will serve you well. And of course, marrying her ties you to this village and its resources." A sly grin spread across Bashir's face. "I'll consider it, but be warned, I am not a man to be trifled with." Zainab assured him there would be no trouble, then hurried home, her mind racing with plans. She summoned Amina, and in a tone that brooked no argument announced, "I have found you a husband." Amina's heart sank. "A husband? But I'm not ready, stepmother." "You will be ready," Zainab snapped. Bashier is wealthy and powerful. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Do not embarrass me by refusing. Amina froze. She had heard of Bashir's cruel nature, the way he treated his servants as mere tools, his callous disregard for those beneath his station. She couldn't imagine spending her life with such a man. But I don't love him, Amina protested, her voice trembling. Marriage should be about more than wealth. Love? Zainab spat, her face twisting in disgust. Love is for fools. This marriage will secure your future and mine. You will obey me in this. Amina pleaded with her stepmother, but Zainab was unmoved. Days later, the engagement was announced. The village murmured in dismay, for they pitied Amina and knew of Bashir's wickedness. But no one dared speak out against Zainab, who had become adept at silencing dissent. As preparations for the wedding began, Amina retreated to her favorite spot under the baobab tree. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered to the stars, asking her late mother for guidance. Her dreams of a loving marriage, a partner who cherished her, felt impossibly far away. Each day brought her closer to a life she dreaded, and her hope began to wither. She felt trapped, unable to see a way out of Zainab's grasp. The village women tried to console her, but their words did little to ease her pain. One evening, as Amina walked back from the river carrying a pot of water, she crossed paths with Bashier. His eyes roamed over her, and he smirked. You'll learn to appreciate the life I offer you, he said smugly. Many women would kill for the privilege. Amina clenched the pot tighter, her heart pounding with frustration and fear. The thought of spending her life with someone so heartless filled her with dread. Though the villagers whispered of injustice and prayed for her deliverance, no one dared challenge Zainab or Bashier. Amina began to feel the walls of her world closing in, her spirit dimming under the weight of her circumstances. She could only dream of a miracle, unaware that her prayers would soon set in motion events that would change her life forever. The dusty road leading into the village was seldom visited by strangers, so when a lone traveller appeared one quiet morning, it stirred whispers among the villagers. He was a tall, lean man with a quiet demeanour, his clothes simple but well kept. He introduced himself as Dapo, a wanderer in search of rest and refuge. His presence was unassuming, yet there was a quiet confidence about him that intrigued those he met. Dapo set up near the marketplace, offering his skills as a woodcarver to earn his keep. His craft quickly gained attention. His hands seemed to work magic, transforming simple logs into beautiful figurines and tools. Though his talents impressed the villagers, it was his kindness and humility that truly won their hearts. He shared food with hungry children, helped elders carry water, and spoke with anyone who approached him, listening with genuine interest. It wasn't long before Dapo noticed Amina. She stood out, not because of her beauty, which was undeniable, but because of the sadness that lingered in her eyes. He watched her quietly from a distance as she moved through the market, her steps slow and her shoulders heavy with a burden no one could see. Their first meeting came by chance. Amina was returning from the well, struggling with a heavy pot of water, when Dapo stepped forward. "Let me help you," he offered gently, taking the pot from her hands. Amina hesitated, surprised by his kindness. Most strangers passed her by without a second glance. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely audible. As they walked together, Dapo struck up a conversation. "You seem troubled," he said, his tone gentle but perceptive. "Is everything all right?" Amina was taken aback by his directness, but found herself nodding. "I'm fine," she lied, though her voice betrayed her. Dapo didn't press further, but his presence lingered in her mind. Over the next few days, he made it a point to greet her whenever their paths crossed. Gradually, Amina began to feel comfortable around him, drawn to his calm energy and the way he seemed to genuinely care about her well-being. One afternoon, as Amina sat beneath the baobab tree, Dapo approached with a small carved bird in his hand. "For you," he said, placing it beside her. Amina smiled for the first time in days. "It's beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "Thank you." "It's a free creature," Dapo said, sitting beside her. "Like you should be." The words struck a chord in Amina, and before she knew it, she was pouring her heart out to him. She spoke of her stepmother's cruelty, the forced engagement to Bashier, and her despair over a future she didn't want. Dapo listened intently, his face calm, but his eyes burning with an intensity that Amina didn't fully understand. "You deserve more than this," he said finally. "You deserve to choose your own path, to live a life that makes you happy." "But what choice do I have?" Amina asked, her voice trembling. "Zainab controls everything. I'm just trapped." Dapo placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "There's always a choice, Amina. Sometimes it takes courage to see it, and sometimes you need someone to remind you of your strength." From that day on, Dapo and Amina grew closer. Their conversations became longer, their laughter more frequent. He taught her to see the beauty in small moments, a butterfly landing on her hand, the warmth of the sun after rain, the resilience of the wildflowers growing in cracks. Slowly, Dapo's presence began to lift the weight from her heart. But Dapo was no ordinary traveller. Though he lived simply among the villagers, there were small hints that he was not who he seemed. The way he spoke with wisdom far beyond his years. The quiet respect he commanded, even without trying. The strange, finely wrought ring he wore on his finger, which he always seemed careful to hide. The villagers, too, began to notice the bond forming between Amina and Dapo. Whispers spread like wildfire, but no one dared speak openly for fear of Zainab's wrath. Zainab herself remained oblivious, too consumed with wedding preparations and scheming to pay attention to Amina's newfound lightness. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Dapo and Amina stood by the riverbank. Dapo gazed at her thoughtfully. "Amina," he said, his voice serious, "promise me something." "What is it?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "Promise me that you'll fight for your happiness no matter what it takes." Amina hesitated, unsure if she had the strength to defy her stepmother and the oppressive expectations placed upon her. But as she looked into Dapo's eyes, she felt a flicker of hope. "I'll try," she whispered. Dapo smiled, a knowing look crossing his face. "That's all I ask." As they walked back to the village together, Amina couldn't shake the feeling that Dapo was more than he appeared. She didn't know it yet, but his arrival in her life was no accident, and the truth about who he was would soon change everything. The day the village had been awaiting, albeit with mixed emotions, finally arrived. The sun shone brightly, casting golden rays over the gathering crowd. Colourful fabrics decorated the village square, and musicians played traditional drums and flutes. Women adorned in vibrant attire danced to the rhythm, while men exchanged hushed conversations about the strange match between Amina and Bashier. Zainab stood at the centre of it all, her smile wide and triumphant. She basked in the attention, greeting guests with false humility, as though she had orchestrated a grand event for the village's benefit. In truth, her heart swelled with pride, confident that her plan to marry Amina to Bashier would secure her own position of power and wealth. Amina, however, was a picture of quiet despair. Draped in an elaborate gown of gold and crimson, she looked every bit the radiant bride, but her eyes betrayed her anguish. Her steps were slow, her hands trembling as the crowd watched her approach the ceremonial platform where Bashier stood, his chest puffed with arrogance. As the ceremony began, the village elder raised his staff, signaling for silence. His voice carried through the square, solemn and steady. "Today, we witness the union of Bashier and Amina, a bond meant to bring honor and prosperity." Bashier smirked, glancing at Amina with a possessive gleam in his eyes. Amina lowered her gaze, feeling the weight of her stepmother's will and the finality of her fate. But just as the elder lifted his hands to bless the union, a voice rang out from the crowd. "Stop!" Gasps rippled through the villagers as all eyes turned to see Dapo stepping forward. He was dressed in the same simple attire he had worn since his arrival, but his presence carried an undeniable authority. He walked with purpose, his gaze fixed on Amina. "What is the meaning of this?" Bashier demanded, his voice filled with irritation. "Who dares interrupt my wedding?" Dapo ignored him and addressed the crowd instead. "I cannot allow this marriage to proceed. Amina does not deserve to be forced into a life of misery." Zainab's face twisted with fury. "How dare you interfere in my family's affairs? You are nothing but a common wanderer." Dapo turned to her, his expression calm but resolute. "You may know me as a wanderer, but that is not my true identity." The crowd murmured in confusion as Dapo removed a plain ring from his finger, revealing a crest engraved with the emblem of a neighboring kingdom. He straightened, his humble demeanor replaced by a regal presence. "My name is Prince Adetokunbo, heir to the throne of the Kingdom of Ifele," he declared, his voice ringing with authority. "I have been traveling incognito to understand the lives of ordinary people. In my journey, I met Amina, a woman whose kindness and strength have captured my heart." The villagers were stunned into silence, their eyes wide as they processed the revelation. Amina's jaw dropped, her mind struggling to reconcile the humble Dapo with the prince now standing before her. "This is preposterous," Bashier shouted, his face red with anger. "You cannot just barge in and claim her. She is mine." Dapo's gaze turned icy. "Amina belongs to no one but herself, and you, Bashier, are far from worthy of her." He turned to the crowd, his voice rising with conviction. "This man, whom you have been told is honorable, is nothing more than a fraud. His wealth is built on deceit, and his power is used to oppress those who cannot defend themselves." Gasps of shock and outrage spread through the villagers. Several stepped forward to corroborate Dapo's words, sharing stories of Bashir's mistreatment of his workers and exploitation of neighboring villages. "Lies!" Bashier roared, but his protests were drowned out by the growing anger of the crowd. Zainab, sensing her plan unraveling, tried to salvage the situation. "This is all nonsense. Bashier is a respected man, and this traveler has no proof of his accusations." Dapo stepped closer to Zainab, his eyes narrowing. "Your motives are no secret, Zainab. You arranged this marriage not for Amina's happiness, but for your own greed. You were willing to sell her future to secure your own gain." The crowd turned on Zainab, their murmurs growing louder as her true intentions came to light. Zainab stammered, her composure slipping as she tried to defend herself. "I only wanted what was best for her." Amina, finding her voice for the first time, stepped forward. Her tone was steady, though her hands still trembled. "No, stepmother, you wanted what was best for you. You never cared about what I wanted or what would make me happy." Zainab was silenced, her face pale with shock. Dapo approached Amina, his expression softening. "Amina, I cannot make this decision for you, but know this. I love you, not as a prince, but as the man who has come to admire your strength, kindness, and courage. If you choose to be with me, it will be because it is your choice and no one else's." Tears filled Amina's eyes as she looked at Dapo, her heart swelling with emotions she could no longer deny. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope, a glimpse of the life she had always dreamed of. Taking a deep breath, Amina turned to the elder. "I cannot marry Bashier," she said firmly, her voice carrying through the crowd. "My heart belongs elsewhere." The crowd erupted in cheers, their joy palpable as they celebrated Amina's courage. Bashier, defeated and humiliated, stormed away, his threats drowned out by the villagers' cheers. Zainab slumped to the ground, her plans in ruins and her reputation tarnished. As the sun set, Amina stood beside Dapo, her hand in his, the weight of her past lifted. Though the road ahead was uncertain, she knew that with Dapo by her side, she could face anything. The cheers of the villagers echoed in the air as Amina stood beside Dapo, her heart pounding. Though she had justified her stepmother and rejected Bashier, doubt lingered in her mind. Could she trust Dapo after discovering his true identity? He had hidden so much from her, his name, his status, and his purpose for being in the village. Was his love for her genuine, or was she just another part of his journey? Sensing her hesitation, Dapo turned to Amina, his eyes searching hers. "I know this is a lot to take in," he said softly, "but I swear to you, Amina, my feelings are real. I didn't plan for any of this to happen. I only came here to learn from the people. Meeting you changed everything. You showed me what true strength and kindness look like." Before Amina could respond, a commotion broke out. Bashier, who had retreated into the shadows, now stormed back into the square, his face twisted with rage. "This is an outrage," he bellowed, pointing an accusatory finger at Dapo. "This so-called prince is a liar and a manipulator. He has deceived you all, playing the role of a commoner to steal what rightfully belongs to me." The crowd murmured, momentarily taken aback by Bashir's outburst. Dapo remained calm, his voice steady as he addressed the villagers. "I have deceived no one. My only crime is choosing to live among you as one of your own. Everything I've said about Bashier is the truth. His actions have spoken for themselves." The villagers nodded in agreement, their loyalty shifting firmly to Dapo and Amina. "We've seen Bashir's cruelty," an elder woman said, stepping forward. "He has no place in this village or in Amina's life." Bashir's confidence faltered as the crowd turned against him. In a last, desperate attempt to save face, he turned on Zainab. "You!" he shouted. "This is your fault. You were the one who promised me your stepdaughter as payment for your greed." All eyes fell on Zainab, who stood frozen, her carefully constructed facade beginning to crumble. "It's not true," Zainab stammered, her voice faltering. "I was only trying to secure a better future for Amina. Bashier is a wealthy man. He could have provided for her." Amina stepped forward, her voice ringing with newfound strength. "Stop lying, Zainab. You never cared about my future. You wanted wealth and power, and you were willing to sell me to get it." The village elders, who had been watching the drama unfold, raised their hands for silence. Their leader, a grey-haired man with a deep, commanding voice, stepped forward. "Enough," he said firmly. "It is clear that Zainab's actions were motivated by selfishness, not love or duty. Her plan to use Amina for her own gain is unacceptable." Zainab opened her mouth to protest, but the elder cut her off. "The engagement is hereby annulled. Amina is free to choose her own path." The villagers erupted in cheers, their joy overwhelming as they celebrated Amina's liberation. Zainab, realizing there was no salvaging her reputation, sank to her knees, her face pale with shame. Bashier, seeing his last ally disgraced, cursed under his breath and stormed out of the village, vowing revenge. But his threats fell on deaf ears. The villagers had rallied behind Amina and Dapo, their faith unshaken. Dapo turned to Amina, his expression filled with hope. "The choice is yours, Amina. I will respect whatever you decide." Amina looked at him, her heart heavy but her mind clearer than it had been in years. She thought of the man who had helped her carry water, who had listened to her dreams, and who had stood by her when no one else did. Titles and wealth aside, she saw the same kind, humble soul she had come to trust. A smile broke across her face. "I choose to follow my heart." Dapo's face lit up with relief and joy. The villagers cheered once more, surrounding the couple in celebration. As the sun set, Amina stood beside Dapo, her stepmother's hold over her life finally broken. Though the future was uncertain, one thing was clear. Amina's courage had won her the freedom to write her own story, and with Dapo by her side, she knew it would be a story worth telling. The days following the wedding drama were filled with transformation and healing for Amina. and the entire village. Dapo, now known to all as Prince Adetokunbo, formally asked Amina for her hand in marriage, not as a prince demanding a bride, but as a man humbly seeking her love and trust. "I promise to honor your dreams and give you the freedom to live the life you've always envisioned," Dapo said, holding Amina's hand as the villagers looked on. Amina smiled, her heart swelling with a mixture of joy and relief. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen and valued. She accepted his proposal, not because of his title or wealth, but because she had come to love the kind and thoughtful man he had proven to be. Preparations for their wedding began almost immediately. Unlike the lavish spectacle Zainab had envisioned for Amina and Bashier, this ceremony was rooted in love and community. The villagers, inspired by Amina's courage, came together to help with every detail. Women wove intricate patterns into fabric for her dress. Men built a ceremonial arch from palm fronds, and children rehearsed traditional songs to perform at the celebration. Zainab, however, was a shadow of her former self. Stripped of the power and respect she had craved, she retreated into the quiet corners of her home, haunted by the consequences of her actions. Though the villagers shunned her initially, Amina approached her one evening, her voice gentle but firm. "Stepmother, your greed and manipulation hurt me deeply," Amina said. "But holding on to anger will only hurt us both. I forgive you, not for your sake, but for mine. You have a chance to change, to do better. Please don't waste it." Zainab looked up, tears streaming down her face. She saw not just the daughter she had mistreated, but a woman of strength, grace, and compassion. For the first time, Zainab realized the depth of her own failings. She vowed to earn back Amina's trust, not with words, but through her actions. The day of the wedding dawned bright and clear. The village was alive with music, laughter, and vibrant decorations. Amina, radiant in her handmade gown, walked toward Dapo with her head held high. The joy in her heart was mirrored in the faces of the villagers, who celebrated not just the union of two people, but the triumph of resilience, love, and integrity. As Dapo and Amina exchanged their vows, the crowd erupted in cheers. Their love story had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, one could find happiness and fulfillment. In the weeks and months that followed, Amina and Dapo worked together to strengthen the bond between the village and Dapo's kingdom. Amina became an advocate for the rights of women and children, using her new role to uplift others who face challenges like her own. Her journey from despair to triumph inspired all who knew her. She had not only broken free from her stepmother's control, but had also stepped boldly into a future filled with love, purpose, and hope. The final scene was one of celebration. Villagers gathered under the stars, their laughter mingling with the music of drums and flutes. Amina and Dapo danced at the center of it all, their hands intertwined, their smiles bright. For Amina, life had truly come full circle. From the ashes of her struggles, she had risen stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the happiness she so richly deserved. The future was hers, and it shone with endless possibilities.